Hey everyone, it's Nora from Nora's Arc here. It is a hot day in Wisconsin. It is the beginning of August and our herb garden is exploding with growth. So we need to get this under control, claim our sidewalk back. So we thought it was a perfect day to give you our general tips for success when pruning your herb garden. So let's get into it. Before we get into our general tips for success on pruning herbs, I just want to mention two things. So the first thing that I want to mention is our herb garden is about 3 to 5 years old. We've planted these herbs at different times, so that's why I say 3 to 5. But I just say that to say that it's well established and the plants have survived winters and their roots are established in the ground. So if you're a beginner with your herb garden and like this is your first year you've planted the plants, I wouldn't recommend pruning them at all. I would let them establish their roots and get really strong before you go into any of this pruning. So I just wanted to let you know that. And then the second thing is we're going to specifically be talking about oregano, sage, and lavender in this video today, but our tips can generally apply to most herbs. So let's get into what those tips actually are. So the first thing is your tool. You want to have a good set of clippers, and something important to know about your clippers is that you want to sanitize them before you do this. So we just soaked them in alcohol for a couple minutes before we did this, and the reason for that is because you don't want to be transferring disease into your herbs when you're cutting them, and because you're cutting them so that they can become healthier, better plants, so we don't want to be introducing disease to them when we cut them. So your tool, that's important. Another thing along those lines of disease and not introducing diseases them is make sure you pick a dry day to do this. So you wouldn't want to do this if you're going to get a bunch of rain that night, because if it rains a lot, then that's going to make the soil splash up on them and it's going to get a bunch of water into those fresh cuts you just made. So you don't want that to happen either. So pick a dry day, make sure you have clean tools. And then something else too I wanted to say is just like, how much of your plant are you going to cut back? So if you read online, there's so much different information. Don't cut more than 1/3 of your plant back. Don't cut 2/3, 50%. Like there's just so many numbers. So what we've come to find out is a general rule of thumb is don't cut back more than 50% of your plant. And kind of just know your plant. So what I mean by that is like if you think you've cut back too much, you probably have. So always err on the side of caution and try not to cut back too much because you don't want to hurt the plant. The whole point of us doing this is to make the plant more healthy and to make it establish its roots stronger and put more energy into the leaves. So we don't want to cut off too much of the plant because that would hinder that entire process. So now that we've talked about how you can do this and our tips for that, let's talk about when you want to do this. So like I said, it's the middle of summer here in Wisconsin. It's August and it's very warm right now. So we're going to prune these herbs back heavily because we know there's no danger of frost in the near future. And I say that because it's like you wouldn't want to cut back your herbs a lot in late September if you live in a cold climate, because that means frost is coming up and your plants might not survive the winter if you cut them back a lot right before it's going to get cold. So do it in the middle of summer. And then something else to mention too is like the timing of it is we always prune our herbs back after they've flowered. So we'll wait until they flower, and then that gives us a good timing for, okay, we're going to cut back all these flowers so that way the plant can send its energy back into the roots and to the leaves. And then also it also gives us a good reference point of where we should cut the plant back to, because we'll cut it back, we'll cut all those flowers back, and that's where we'll kind of cut the plant back to. So now that we've covered the general tips for oregano and sage, and like I said, they can apply to most herbs that you'd be pruning, let's look at one more plant, and that is lavender. Now let's talk about how to prune lavender specifically. So the general tips that I mentioned before still apply here. Use clean clippers, do it on a dry day, but lavender has just a couple more things that I want to mention for tips for pruning lavender. So with lavender, you're actually going to prune it about 3 times depending on how many times it flowers. So the first time that you're going to prune it is in early spring, and we did that this year, and you're going to prune it back to its woody stems. And then that just helps it become a nice strong plant and give you a good first flush of lavender flowers off of it. So then the second time that you're going to prune it, which is what we're going to be doing today, is we're going to cut off all of these flowers. So that'll be about 2/3 of the plant, but we're just going to cut back all of these flowers, and then hopefully we will get one more round of lavender flowers after that. And then that'll be the third time that we would prune it, is we would cut back the second flush of flowers if we get that. So that's why I say 3 times, depending on how many times it flowers. And the reason I just mention all of that for lavender is because it's just a little bit different than our oregano and our sage. We don't prune those back in the early spring. And then something else with lavender is, like, you don't really have to think about those second 2 prunings, because ideally you're using the flowers. So you're just cutting back the flowers, and then that's your pruning, and you're harvesting your flowers at the same time. I say ideally because we haven't really used our lavender as much as we would like to. We just leave it out here for the bees, bring some inside and put it in a vase so it smells good. But we would love to start using more of our lavender flowers. So if you guys use your lavender flowers, let us know what you do with them in the comments, because we would definitely like to start utilizing this plant more. If you learned something from this video today, make sure to give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe to our channel, and you can get to know all of our great gardening advice. And we are going to get to pruning all of these herbs.